Melinda, it's funny that you asked that, because when you ask, I interviewed the Minister of Defense while there. It was my second time interviewing him this year. And he was very positive and believed, maybe late summer, early fall, where you could start seeing targets against Crimea with the long range missiles. You could start seeing some gains. Maybe they'd be in Kherson by this point, by maybe late September, early October. You talk to the soldiers and they'll tell you a very different story. They'll tell you, let Kyiv think whatever it wants. We're the ones on the front line, and we believe that it's going to be a lot longer than that. They were very sober about their assessment for what the time frame was. They didn't want to kind of give any estimate, but what they said is, we know when we're ready. We know when this battle is going to tip in our favor, and we're just not there yet. And so I caution people to kind of, take what you're hearing from the government and the spokespeople for the armed forces with a grain of salt, because when you go to the front lines, the commanders of those forces will tell you something very different, and they are a lot more conservative about any kind of estimates. They do believe that those estimates being out there in the public is good for momentum, to keep soldiers revved up and have them, believe that this battle is in their favor. But when you go there and you see the traumatized look on their faces, and just like how brutal and how slow and painful this battle has been, you recognize that, there's truth to both stories in terms of maybe an average somewhere in the middle of what the time frame could be.
I really believe that this offensive can have a major effect on this war. But I will caveat that by saying up front and rolling a grenade out on the table, and that is to be determined by leaders in the West. If we are going to provide Ukraine what it needs, Ukraine has the wherewithal, the fielded forces, and the will to make a difference. And so largely how this rolls out will depend on what the West has done to help supply the effort.
Of all of Russia's acute problems with personnel shortages and losing some of their best equipment in the early phases, expending so many of their high precision munitions, they're trying to take this plan B ad hoc way to overcome these challenges, right? So they're drawing between 9 to different pools of people to try to fill fill spots on the front line. They're recruiting from prisons. There's rumors they're recruiting from psychiatric institutions. I mean, it's just really trying to get bodies and put them on the front line, receiving anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks of basic training at most. This is really not a successful way to solve this problem, as one might expect. It will allow them to replenish the current front lines, but I share the assessments of the group that this is not something that is going to allow them to make really rapid gains forward. They just can't do it.
I mean, I saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. You did too. We cannot go back to a period of history where we saw that military power was right. We cannot go back to that. And so I think what's at stake here is fundamentally a fight for their freedom, our freedom, but also the international rule-based order. So they are the ones who will decide the future of their country. Putin must not be allowed to win. He must not be allowed to show the world that brutality wins. He must not be allowed to show the world that breaking rules and borders goes uncounted. He must not be allowed to prevail on the basis that might is right. This is why it is so important for us across the Atlantic, in NATO and also in Europe, to stand together now. Putin's attack on Ukraine is an effort to bring Europe back to before the fall of the Berlin Wall. It is an effort to break the international rule-based system that we have carefully developed since the Second World War. Putin is longing back to the growing Russian empire of colonial times. He sees his neighborhood, so to say, as a buffet where he can pick and choose it's not going to happen. It is a direct threat to our values, to peace and security, to democracy, and also to prosperity.